In today's episode, we discuss Cedar Point's steel racing coaster that may have been a little overambitious in its marketing claims. Welcome to Airtime Traveler. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Roller Coaster History Podcast. You are listening to Airtime Traveler. My name is Nathan Grace, and as always, I'm joined by my wife and lovely co-host.
Hey, I'm Haley Grace.
And thank you for tuning in to episode 12 of the podcast. Appreciate your patience as we did not release an episode a couple weeks ago, but we had just gotten back from our trip to Cedar Point, and we were both very sick. And
I can't even believe how sick we were still.
I didn't even have a voice, so even if we wanted to record, then we wouldn't have been able to. So we just needed a break.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and luckily it wasn't COVID, but like it was.
Yes,
still,
it was not COVID, but it was
whatever
it was. It was brutal.
Interesting. So.
But we're back, and we've got so much to record. There's so much news that's happened in the past couple of weeks, and the Golden Ticket Awards were last week, and so I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Plus, we went to Cedar Point, and we still haven't recorded our trip reports from Kings Island and Hershey Park and Kennywood and Carowin. So I don't know. We got lots of content coming in the next few weeks.
D23 announced things as well.
And Disney announced some stuff, and I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff happening right now.
Yeah.
So. But we will get to that. Today we're just going to have our normal episode of Airtime Traveler. So we'll get to the other stuff later. So be sure to follow the podcast so that you are alerted whenever we post new things. So, we do Airtime Traveler every other week. But, like I said, we'll have some trip reports and some other content coming up in the near future. So if you haven't listened to Airtime Traveler before, basically... each episode, we take one roller coaster and we dive into the history of that individual coaster. I am a coaster enthusiast and have been for a long time, and my wife is a member of the GP, or the general public. And so I'm here to share these stories with her, and she's here to make sure I'm not too boring. So that's one way to put it, I suppose.
Yeah. Although I will say that you were super excited about this episode. You even talked to me about how excited you were last night.
This episode was I found so one of the things, if you've listened to the episode before, one of our favorite things is weird newspaper articles that I find as I'm, digging into the history of these coasters. And we're talking about a coaster that's a little bit older today. So I read through so many newspaper articles, and I just found some absolutely ridiculous stuff. And so I've got so much to look at today. I'm excited. I'm hoping you'll enjoy some of these ridiculous articles as much as I did. So,
oh my goodness.
So we'll just jump right into it. So we just got back from Cedar Point a couple weeks ago. It was our first time that both of us had been to Cedar Point. And so, with that being said, I figured what better, park to talk about than talk about one of the coasters at Cedar Point. So, today we're going to talk about... Oh, why is this not working? Hold on one second. Technical difficulties. There we go. We're talking about Gemini at Cedar Point today. So... You have to remember which one.
Yeah.
So Gemini was the racing one.
Okay.
So the one that has the blue and the red train. So
yeah, that one was fun.
So I guess we can just take a minute, just talk about our thoughts. So anyway, you started. You already said it was fun. So what other thoughts you have about it?
I'm trying to remember, honestly. I remember it was fun.
You told me while we were on the ride that you wouldn't ride it again. So I don't know if...
rough. I think it was just a little bit rough for me.
Yeah, it was a little rough. I mean, it is...
An older coaster.
It is an older one, so we'll talk about the history of it. But I really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it about as much as I anticipated. Like, it didn't blow me away, but I also wasn't disappointed. Like, I kind of knew.
Wasn't it like super long? Like, it was a longer like wooden coaster for a racer.
I mean, it's a pretty long ride. I think
I think that was my other thing is because of how rough it was for that long. It was like I don't think. I
think from beginning to end, it's 2 minutes and 40 seconds, so it's a pretty long ride. Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I knew it was an older coaster, and I knew it was similar to like a mine train coaster, but not exactly the same. So I knew it was going to be, the transitions might be a little wonky and that it might be a little rough around the edges, but I think I enjoyed it just as much as I anticipated. So it was good. So it's in my top 50, not super high in my top 50, but it is there. So yeah, it was good. It was a fun ride. I'd ride it again for sure. So, yeah, it opened in 1978. So it's been, 44 years old now at this point. So it has been there quite a long time. And it's never been in the Golden Ticket Awards, mostly because, as we've talked about, Golden Ticket Awards didn't start till the 90s. So by that point, Gemini was already 20 years old. It had been outclassed by dozens of coasters at that point. In the CoasterBot rankings, it currently ranks number 172 in the country. It ranks below coasters such as Space Mountain at Disneyland, Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, and the Bat at Kings Island. It ranks above coasters such as Skyrocket at Kennywood, Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom, and Scream at Six Flags Magic Mountain.
The Space Mountain surprises me.
It's kind of interesting, yeah. It ranks below Disneyland Space Mountain, which is the newer of the two here in the U.S. So, but it ranks above Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom, which is interesting because Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom was actually built by the same company, but it's older. It was built a few years before Gemini was. So,
got it.
Let's see. At Cedar Point, it ranks 9th. So it's interesting because Cedar Point is so stacked. Like if this coaster was at Kennywood, it would probably rank like third or fourth at the park, right? But because Cedar Point just has so much, like it just ranks really far down the list. So Steel Vengeance ranks number 1, then Maverick, Millennium Force, then Magnum XL200, Raptor, Gatekeeper, Valraven. I'm just going through these quickly because there's so many of them.
Valraven is that low.
I
really liked Valraven.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we do our trip report, but coaster enthusiasts like to hate on Valraven, which is so funny to me. I think a lot of coaster enthusiasts...
It's like one of my top ones.
I know, I loved it, but I think a lot of coaster enthusiasts don't like the vest restraints because they say you don't get as much airtime because it's like tight on your chest.
Oh, yeah.
But to me personally, I could care less. I prefer
that.
I know. I prefer the vest restraints over the typical ones because there's no head banging. So anyway.
Yeah.
But so yeah, and then
one less headache for me. So.
Yeah, I agree. So then it's after Valraven, it's Rougarou, and then Gemini, and then after Gemini is Blue Streak, Iron Dragon, Corkscrew, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, and then the 2 kiddie coasters. So okay, so review of the logo.
Not a bad logo.
It's fine. I mean, it's very 80s.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it opened in 78, so it's not quite 80s, but it does have like a pretty 80s vibe to it.
Kind of that, like, I don't know.
Yeah, so.
Like a techie kind of look.
So, review of the entrance. The entrance, I mean, and the queue are fine, but I do really love the station. The station is pretty cool.
I do remember commenting on that I really loved the station.
Yeah, a lot of bright colors. Again, very...
I loved the glass top.
Yeah, the glass.
That was really cool.
Like these... So I guess these banners that they have in the station were, like, they were there originally when it opened, and then they took them out. And then I think, like, a few years ago, they actually put them back in.
Oh, cool.
And so I think that was a good decision. I think it looks really cool with the banners in there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I like the station. It looks really good. Very, very retro.
Absolutely, yeah.
The paint.
But that's so in right now.
It is. Yeah.
That whole retro.
They sell a lot of Gemini product at the park just because not only, like, because it's been there forever, right?
Right.
But also like that style just is really popular right now too.
Yeah,
so they sell a lot of Gemini shirts and hats and stuff like that. So
especially those colors. Those are really in right now.
So someone said they should make a shirt that it has the same design as the banners, but they don't have that. But I don't know. I think they should. That's pretty cool.
That's not too hard.
No, it's not. There you go. The paint scheme is just brown.
Yeah.
It's nothing special there.
There you go.
So, which, I mean, it's a hybrid coaster, so the structure is wood. So, I mean, that makes sense. But then the steel, I don't know, the steel's just gray, brown, whatever it does. It's, paint scheme's nothing special.
Right.
I do like the trains, though.
Yeah.
Like, I think the trains look really good, and I like
I bet, like, trains are easier to repaint and redo than the entire coaster.
Definitely. So.
But, yeah, they look great.
Yeah, the trains do look really good.
Oh, you know what? You remember riding this and that guy that, like, kept, like, yelling at us the entire ride and...
Oh yeah, he was on the other train and he kept, I don't remember what he said, but he just kept like trash talking like
you're going down. Then you cheated. Like
as we'd start passing like oh, a bunch of cheaters or
yeah. I will say that like when we went to Cedar Point, like the crowds like seemed to be a lot like nicer. Like I didn't really.
There were pretty cool people there, so it seemed there was a lot of enthusiasts there.
Yes, there were.
Like I usually go to a park. I usually see a couple enthusiasts here and there, but it's mostly GP.
Well, because like when we went to Kings Island and had coaster stock, like
I guess that was the exception. Like coaster stock, I did see a lot more enthusiasts at Kings Island, but like. When I went to Carowinds, like I saw a few enthusiasts here and there. You can usually pick them out by their shirt, but
you.
Well, yeah, because you see someone like wearing a Beast shirt at Carowinds, you're like, okay, that's a coaster enthusiast.
Yeah, I mean, you even wore your powder cake.
Oh yeah, I wore my powder cake shirt to Cedar Point, and one of the ride ops was like, "Whoa, I like your shirt."
Yeah.
So people probably could pick me out as an enthusiast while we're there, but. It seemed like half the people at Cedar Point were coaster enthusiasts. Like there was like Carowinds shirts and Six Flags shirts and Fury and I don't know, Twisted Timbers. Like it was all over the place. I saw so many enthusiasts. So which was cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, I like the trains. The trains, they're simple, but they look really good. Especially they contrast well against the boring paint scheme.
Well, I think it even contrasts well, like, against the sky. Like, on a bright, sunny day, like, they contrast really well with the sky.
Yeah, they look really good. So, all right, here's the park's description of the ride. I find this hilarious. I was reading this, and I'm like, what? So here's Cedar Point's description of Gemini. It's fast versus faster in this game of dueling coasters. No matter the day's horoscope, which I guess that makes sense, because Gemini is an astrological sign, so... Okay. All right. No matter the day's horoscope, riders will feel the twin car's energetic and quick-witted personalities thrive as they ride racing for the win. Quick-witted personalities? All right. I never really thought of a coaster having a personality.
Yeah.
Gemini riders will choose between Team Red or Team Blue before racing side by side through all kinds of drops, twists, and turns. And... there's a lot of this. Red and blue trains travel parallel next to one another, complete with smack talk coming from both competitors. So I guess it's well known among people that like when you're going through those slow turns, like I don't know. I guess it's common for people to smack talk each other because it says it right in the description of the coaster on their website.
Funny.
It's pretty funny. So it always ends in a close call. It's only when the twins come back together after helices that anyone can be crowned victorious. It's a good thing that victory isn't determined by who finished first, but who has more fun.
Oh, well, why the cheesy?
Oh, okay.
So cheesy.
That's pretty corny.
So cheesy.
Oh my gosh. This sounds like it was written in 1978.
Yes. All right, marketing. You gotta fix that.
It's really funny. Let's see. Customer reviews. You ready for this? Oh, I love this new segment that we do. This is so funny. 1 star. I'd love to give the ride itself 5 out of 5, but the line jumping has gotten out of hand. Every time we get in line for Gemini, we have to deal with line jumpers. The workers don't do anything except tell them not to do it again, even after the line jumpers threaten the people calling them out. threaten the people calling them out. Jeez.
You're giving the ride a review from line jumpers.
The people, I don't know, this was quite an intense review. 1 star, it sucks. That's all I put. Alright. 1 star, cranky. What is cranky?
Like, crank, I don't know. I don't know.
That made me cranky? This is odd. 2 stars. I went on this ride last year with my uncle. On the first hill, the roller coaster was like your head tilting back on the seat really hard and dropping down. I honestly was really scared and had tears in my eyes a lot through the whole ride. Eventually, when I was finished, my back hurt and my voice was like nothing and couldn't speak after that ride. The ride was fine, I guess, but maybe I can't handle roller coasters and heights.
She's a GP.
Clearly. 2 stars. It gave me more broken bones than I gave it stars.
That's a great review.
That was pretty funny. I enjoyed that. 3 stars. It's a fun roller coaster, but boy is it bumpy, especially when compared to other rides in the park. It's a good ride, but only 3 stars when compared to what else you could do with your time here at the park. Which, okay, I can see that a little bit. Like, yeah, it's a good ride, but it definitely has been outclassed by some of the other things.
I like looking too at how many reviews these people leave. Like 102 reviews. What do you do with your time that
That's
you
a lot
have?
of reviews. He does. I mean, he is verified, so I don't know if maybe he's like that's like his thing. Is he enjoys going on trips and reviewing things? I don't know. But
people pay him to review. So
I don't know about that. 3 stars. When you go down the first hill, it feels like you're falling off the track. What?
I guess 6
that's
years ago.
Called airtime, I guess is what he's referring to. 3 stars. Rattled my teeth out, so glad I waited an hour for that.
Don't wait an hour. Go rate something else.
I would not wait an hour for Gemini.
But people don't know that. Like, they see a big coaster and they get in line.
It's true. Yeah.
And then they're disappointed because it's bumpy.
You're like, oh, it's a long ride. It must be a long line. It must be a good ride. And then you're like,
yeah.
Oh. Yeah. I am curious when you would wait an hour for that, because when I looked at like the average wait time over the course of a year, the average wait time is like 20-25 minutes. Mm-hmm. So that must be like only on Saturdays. Maybe. During the summer it gets that busy. I don't know. So especially because it's a dueling coaster, like the capacity is double what it would be normally. So I feel like it can't have that long of a line. But anyway. 3 stars. It was closed, but if it wasn't, I would have loved it. Well, then why are you reviewing it? Don't review a coaster you didn't ride.
It's a great review.
Also, 3 stars. What? 3 stars? What?
3 stars for a ride you didn't ride.
But if it wasn't closed, I would have loved it.
Cool.
I don't understand this at all.
Okay.
4 stars. This one's funny. Anyone who says this ride is smooth is on something potent. But aside from the bumps, it's a good ride, especially if you have newbies or kids that aren't ready for Magnum or Millennium yet. It's no pushover ride, but it won't melt your face like Millennium or Steel Vengeance will. Okay.
Melt your face.
That makes sense. So, but yeah, I like that first line. Someone who says this ride is smooth is on something potent. That's funny.
I guess I need to be on that when I ride bumpy rides.
Yeah.
So.
5 stars. Very smooth for a wood coaster. Racing tracks is also very neat. That's the other thing. A lot of people don't realize that it looks like a wood coaster, but it's actually like the track is steel.
Vibrant, yeah.
So like even though it looks like a wooden coaster, that's why it's like this guy says it's smooth for a wood coaster. Well, that's because it has steel track. Right. So it looks like a wooden coaster, but it's not.
Right.
5 stars. Best coaster in the park. This is the one to beat. Really? Really?
There you go.
Yeah, when I pulled this review, it was literally the day before. So this was like 3 or 4 days ago when I pulled this. Love the station architecture too. Wrote it 18 times in a row in 2002. Okay. That was 20 years ago, and you're just writing this review? I don't understand this.
They're the true airtime travelers.
I guess so. Best coaster in the park. I don't even think 20 years ago it was the best coaster in the park. That is really funny, but to each their own, I suppose. I think that's the last one. Yeah, okay. So, there's our customer reviews of Gemini.
Alrighty.
So, some interesting ones in there. So, So let's talk about the history of Gemini. So let's go back to 1959. All right, 1959. We're not going to stay here too long, but there is one important milestone that occurs around this time to kind of lay the foundation for Gemini. So in 1959, Disneyland had been operating for several years at this point. I think they opened in 55, 54, something like that. And the park had been extremely successful, but they were already looking to expand. So I guess Walt Disney had like this idea for building this big mountain over on I don't know what side, I don't know cardinal direction, what side of the park. It's the right side of the park if you're looking at from Main Street. And so they had dabbled with maybe it being a water ride, and I don't know, they had dabbled with a couple different ideas, but in 1959, they officially came up with the idea of doing Disneyland's first roller coaster. And so in 1959, they would open Matterhorn bobsleds. So I don't want to go into too many specifics because at some point I want to cover the entire history of Matterhorn bobsleds because that's a whole other story that's really fascinating. But basically, Disney and Aerodynamics, which Aerodynamics was brand new, this was their first roller coaster they ever did. And they developed a new type of steel coaster that had tubular rails. So most steel coasters at that point just had like a piece of metal that was like flat that they would sit on top of. This was the first time they did it like in a tube. Mm-hmm. And then they had wheels on top and bottom. And anyway, so it was revolutionary for the time. And so Matterhorn opens in 1959. And the twin coaster would be revolutionary in the coaster industry and also kind of jumpstart Aerodynamics building roller coasters in the industry. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So like I said, we'll talk more about Matterhorn at another time. But after the next several years, Aerodynamics would kind of hone the idea and kind of improve on it. And they would eventually start building a new model known as the Mine Train coaster, which they're all they're all over the place. We've been on, there's one at Hershey Park, there's one at Silver Dollar City, there's dozens of them. So they utilized a wood structure, but it would have steel rails. And the design was similar to Matterhorn, but it would have much longer trains. Matterhorn was just like the tiny little, kind of like Space Mountain. They have just little 6-person trains. The wood and steel coasters became known as hybrid coasters since they utilize both wood and steel in their structures. So it's like a hybrid between the two different types of roller coasters. Makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. The first one of these Mine Train coasters to open would be Runaway Mine Train, which opened in 1966 at Six Flags Over Texas and continues to operate to this day. So this is a picture of the first one that they built. And over the next several decades, dozens of these Mine Train coasters would open all over the place, including Big Thunder Mountain was kind of based off of the idea. It's not confirmed whether Disney built it themselves or Aerodynamics actually helped them with it, but it's basically the same idea. So I don't know. Anyway,
Disney stamp.
I guess so. So, but that wouldn't open until I think 75 is when Big Thunder Mountain opened at Magic Kingdom. I'd have to double check the dates, but so this is 66. So Mine Train coasters, they're being built all over the place. Now we'll go to Cedar Point because they've been operating since 1870, and they had a really long history of roller coasters. They've been, I think in 1892, they opened their first roller coaster, the Switchback Railway, it was called. It didn't even have seatbelts. Like that's how old this roller coaster was. It was just.
I still can't imagine that, riding something without a seatbelt.
From what I understand, it literally was like, it was all gravity powered. Like someone would just push the car out of the station, and then it would just like go over like these hills, and then end at the other end of the track. So that was like the first roller coasters that ever opened in like the late 1800s. But so over the 152 years they've operated, they've opened over 30 roller coasters. So after barely surviving World War II, they had we've talked about how World War II really impacted the amusement industry, and a lot of parks closed during that time. Cedar Point happened to survive though, And then, right after that, they started opening roller coasters again. So these are just some of the coasters they opened in the 50s and 60s, but they opened Little Dipper in 1952, the Super Coaster in 53, the Wild Mouse in 59, Scamper in 62, Broadway Trip in 64, and then Blue Streak also in 64, which Blue Streak we rode. That one's still there today. These other ones have since been torn down. So the park was on the up and up. They were building coasters left and right, and, they had kind of developed a reputation as one of the best roller coaster parks in the country. But they wanted to continue that tradition. Like, park officials didn't want to just... I don't know. This is kind of where the tradition for Cedar Point of always building record-breaking roller coasters, this is kind of where it started. And so when they saw, that Six Flags opened this mine train coaster, they were like, oh, we got to get on that. We got to get one of those ourselves. And so they ended up buying the third one ever to open in the country. So Six Flags had the first two, and then the third one was Cedar Creek Mine Ride, which would be built in 1969.
I wrote this one.
Mm-hmm, yep, this one's still there. So
I liked this one. Well, I liked the picturesqueness.
It's very picturesque, and it's very rough, but
I remember
but
it being really rough.
It's over 50 years old at this point, so makes sense.
Right.
It's but it's cool that it's still there, and it has a really fascinating history too. But so not to be outdone by Six Flags, though, Cedar Creek Mine Ride was faster, taller, longer than both of the other Six Flags ones that had already opened. And so thus began Cedar Point's claim to record-breaking roller coasters, as they've done since. But so over the next several years, Aerodynamics would continue to improve their mine train model, and bigger and faster versions would open at Six Flags Magic Mountain and Carowinds and Hershey Park. But Aerodynamics was also working on other ideas, like other coaster models that they wanted to, offer in the industry. And the big thing that Aerodynamics did that we've talked about several times already is that they built the first roller coaster to go upside down, first steel coaster to go upside down, when they opened Corkscrew at Knott's Berry Farm in 1975.
Which, that's at Cedar Point.
No, but, so we'll talk about it right now. So Corkscrew opened at...
I always jump the gun.
Well, you're not jumping it too far, because literally that's exactly what I'm jumping into.
So I'm not in too much trouble.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
So Corkscrew opened at Knott's Berry Farm in 1975, and Cedar Point basically went, oh, we got to have one of those. Like, they immediately, we need to have something like that. So this one went upside down twice, and Cedar Point was like, can we do one that goes upside down 3 times? Because we want to be the first, the first roller coaster to go upside down 3 times. That's what we want. And so just 1 year later, so 75, this is built. In 76, Cedar Point builds this, which is also called Corkscrew, so that's not confusing. Yeah. The only difference is this one has a loop, and then it does 2 corkscrews, where the one in Knott's Berry Farm didn't have the loop. So this one had 3, making it the first roller coaster to go upside down 3 times. Again, their marketing team is using that to push the marketing and say, we had the first coaster to go upside down 3 times. So, I also found this newspaper clipping. So here's our first newspaper clipping.
Oh boy.
So this is unrelated to Gemini, because this is more for Corkscrew. So we'll probably talk about this again whenever we do a Corkscrew episode someday. But this was just really funny. So this is for Summerthon 77 Roller Coaster Week. And, where is it? If you're among the first 200 each day to ride all 5 coasters, so at this point they have 5 roller coasters at the park, you're a certified member of the Cedar Point High Rollers Club, and you get a top 10 album by a group like Bob Seger or the Eagles. All others who ride all 5 get a free 45 RPM single. Pick up an entry card at the Roller Coaster Week booth on the Funway or at each coaster.
I bet you, though, that those, whatever that they gave away that year is, super, super a lot of money now.
I mean, it might be, but if it's just a Bob Seger and Eagles album, there's probably no way to prove it that you got it at Cedar Point Roller Coaster Week or whatever. It probably just looks exactly like all the other ones. But I thought that was weird. I was like, can you imagine them doing something like that today? How... They couldn't even do that today. They'd be like, here's a Spotify gift card, I guess. I mean, there's...
I got you $1.
I mean, yeah.
Pretty much.
I guess records are kind of coming back in. Maybe they could do the same thing. They just give you a record. But anyway, you could win a stereo LP is what the title says.
I'd do it.
Cedar Point, more rides than ever before, and a lot more than just rides. Okay. Yeah. Also, what is it? You can win one of 4 Kawasaki KZ200s. Just describe riding the corkscrew in one word. And there's like this huge content. You like write the one word on a piece of paper, send a postcard with your name. What is this? This is so bizarre. I don't know. How would just describe writing the corkscrew?
If someone were to hand this to me and say, "Look, like this is for Cedar Point, isn't it cool?" I'm like, I'm not reading that. That's a lot of words.
This is really wordy for a contest to describe a roller coaster in one word.
Yeah. Very
bizarre. Anyway, there's your first newspaper article.
All right.
Has nothing to do with Gemini, but I just found it and I was like, I gotta show this. This is ridiculous. All right, so corkscrew opens. However, likely to the dismay of Cedar Point officials, Aerodynamics was already working with Marriott to build 2 foreign-version roller coasters that same year. So just like 2, I think even like a week later, Demon opens at both of the Marriott parks, now Six Flags Great America and California's Great America. So basically the same ride, but it has 2 loops and then 2 corkscrews. And this one, the theming's better on this one. Like this one goes like through this archway in one of the loops, which is kind of cool. Yeah, this one's kind of cool. I like the paint scheme's cool. Anyway, I like this. I like the theming on this one better. But
yeah.
So Cedar Point held that record for like 5 days.
Yeah.
So that was not that exciting. So likely at this point, this isn't necessarily confirmed, but I imagine Cedar Point was probably sitting there like, okay, we need something that's going to be a record breaker that can hold the record for like a while. Not just because this inversion record would basically over the next several years, the inversion record was being broken like every year. Because like the next year there was a coaster with 5 inversions, and then 6, and then 7, and then I think finally at like 7 or 8 is when it finally stopped for a while, and then it wasn't until many years later that it was broken, and I think now the record is 13. I think that's the record. I think there's a coaster called the Smiler in England. I think is 13 is the record now. But
that's crazy.
Anyway,
no thanks.
That's a lot. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't even gotten on Steel Curtain yet.
And yeah, Steel Curtain has 9. So, yeah. That's the most in the US is 9.
It makes me nauseous just thinking about it.
So.
You and my brother are nuts though. You're like, let's go.
Oh, it was awesome. I love Steel Curtain. It was a lot of fun. So.
In your honest opinion, is it something that I would ride?
The only thing I will say about Steel Curtain is it's just a lap bar. So you don't even have to worry about any headbanging at all. So that is one plus that might get you to go on it. So
maybe one day.
Maybe. So let's see. So October 26, 1977, Cedar Point announced that they would be building the tallest, fastest, and steepest roller coaster in the world. So this was from like a history book about Cedar Point that I found. Looks like, so this is kind of, it looks like in, what's the word I'm looking for? A rendition of what Gemini was going to be. This is even before they had announced a name or anything, though. And the spot that they're pointing at is different than where it's at today. That's actually most of where that location is right now is mostly where Millennium Force is. So, because Millennium Force, the station's like here, and then it comes back and does all its, it's, because it's such a big coaster, it goes all over the place. But I think they call that spot in the park Millennium Isle, because that's where like most of the Millennium Force track is. So it's kind of interesting. That's where originally it looks like they were going to put it, and then they must have changed their minds at some point. But so this was the official announcement. This is from the paper. They have this artist rendition, which this looks pretty accurate to what they ended up actually doing.
Are you sure that's just an artist rendition?
It's definitely not a photograph, so it must be a drawing of some kind. So, because this was November 2nd, 1977 is when this article was, and the coaster was still, it was basically just concrete footers at the time that this was announced. So, some of the things interesting from the article talks about the records it's going to break. Construction has already begun. This ride will have the best roller coaster thrill ever designed. The riders will drop 118 feet off the first hill at a very steep 55-degree angle, and that's the best part of any roller coaster. Okay, I think that's opinion, but all right. It's the highest and steepest, so it should also be the fastest. That's a weird. I saw that several times looking through these articles where it was like, it's the highest and steepest, so it should be the fastest. I feel like the engineers should have that pegged down a little bit, a little better before you start making that claim. But anyway, I thought that was funny. Just, it should be the fastest.
Yeah, here you go. I'm gonna give you the
We're assuming that this is going to be the fastest roller coaster. I can't imagine a park saying that nowadays. This might be the fastest roller coaster.
Yeah, here you go.
We're still working on a name that will characterize what we think will be the greatest roller coaster in the world. All right. Talks about it's about 4,000 rides per hour. I think that was a little ambitious, but it says 6 trains operating continuously. In 1970, let's see. Oh, and then they talk about how this it's the completion of the first phase of, like, they were adding this midway on the right side of the park. So it started with Corkscrew, and then they kind of pushed it even further back and built Gemini. And so they were kind of building this path that would go along the right side of the park all the way to Frontier Town in the back of the park. So, let's see. I think that's the end. I think that's all I have for this article. So, they would mention that they wanted to open the coaster for opening day in 1978, but I guess they had like a horrible, horrible blizzard in January of 1978.
I'll do it.
Oh, and I read several places how bad it was. So apparently the winter weather was so bad that the construction team put up a large temporary structure and would, like, move the structure so that they could build the coaster in sections and still be quote unquote indoors. So that is crazy. Like, that's how bad it was. They're like, if we don't do something, we're never going to get this done until, it warms up. And so their solution was to build, like, a temporary building for them to build inside of.
I do remember how cold it gets up there. Like, it can get...
It does. It's
really,
brutal.
Really cold.
So after several months of construction, so here's some of the pictures of, during the construction in late 1977 and early 78. In March of 78, the park would officially announce the coaster's new name as Gemini, which is Latin for twins, that's where the astrological symbol and the constellation, it's based on. Gemini is Latin for twins, and I won't get into all the astrology behind it, but the name makes sense because it's a twin coaster, and so Gemini symbolizing twins. So it makes sense. It's a good name. I like it. Let's see what's next. Oh, here's an artist rendition. So this is actually, like, early. I found this on Cedar Point's Twitter page. So this is pretty cool. This was like someone sketching out what they wanted the trains to look like. So this is actually like from 77, 78 of someone sketching
like
with it.
It's
either like watercolor or like a marker or something. But anyway, the only difference they really, because this looks pretty close to what they actually ended up doing. The only difference is they put the logo on the front of the train. Yeah. And you can see down here the note he or she made of blue with white, which is the one they pictured, and then red with yellow would be the other train. So pretty cool. I like it. I like when parks have, like, old documents and stuff like that to show, like, really cool. The development process behind the coaster.
I think that's why one of the reasons I love Disney so much is, like, they always do such a good job at keeping their records.
They keep everything. So let's see. I got a bunch of newspaper articles, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. There's some bits and pieces that I thought were interesting. So this was the announcement of when they officially named the coaster. It said Gemini was chosen from literally hundreds of names. Hundreds. I don't know if that is true. They say literally hundreds of names. That seems a little excessive.
I I mean, newspaper articles are excessive.
But that's a quote from the marketing manager of the park, though. So, hundreds? That's...
I guess.
Dozens, I believe. Hundreds, that seems excessive. But, so he says literally hundreds of names and dozens of brainstorming sessions all over the park this fall and winter. So, apparently they had a tough time coming up with a name. Lots of other stuff they already talked about in the other article. This is where they talk about the temporary structure that allowed them to build in the winter. And then they talk about a figure 8 design, which a lot of coasters at this point were kind of out and back layouts, which basically it would go out, make one turnaround, and then come all the way back. That was kind of the basis for, Blue Streak is like that. The Racer at Kings Island is like that. That's pretty typical especially for wooden coasters, to just be an out and back layout. Where a figure 8 design, it was designed where it would make a turn, but then it would cross over itself. So, like, if you look at Gemini, it literally looks kind of like a figure 8, just because as the track kind of crosses over itself, makes a turn around, crosses back over itself. So, anyway, kind of interesting. It allowed by doing that, it allows the ride to be even longer because it's, instead of just making an oval shape like you're crossing over, which makes the ride longer. And also makes it more interesting when you're diving around the supports and kind of creates head chopper effects. So, kind of cool. Okay, so this article, this is a weird one too, but
Of course it is, because it's you that found it.
I don't know what it is about all these articles I find, but so this one says Cedar Point to go round and round, new roller coaster being built called Highest, Steepest, Fastest. So it's talking about Gemini, but then over here it says that Gemini, Cedar Point's 6th roller coaster, touted as the world's highest, steepest, and fastest, won't be finished when the park gates open, however. So, and then it goes to talk about the winter weather, like we already talked about. Instead, here's what it says. Instead, the park's antique merry-go-rounds will be the focus of opening day activities.
What?
Why?
Yeah, I want to go to the park to ride a merry-go-round when I can go ride a merry-go-round in a shopping mall.
I don't understand why
would they focus on that?
At the front. Why not the other roller coasters? Why the carousel? I don't know.
And like when I first walked into the park, like I did notice that the carousel's like boom right there, right in front of your face.
They have I'm pretty sure they have 3 carousels there actually, because they have the regular one.
Yeah. They
have, I think, a smaller one in one. It's either, I don't think it's in Camp Snoopy. I think it's in the kiddie section that's over, kind of over by Gatekeeper. And then they also have another one called Cedar Downs Derby, and it's like a faster carousel, which is weird. It's pretty unique. There's not really another carousel that's like it, but it's like a carousel, but it's like 2 or 3 times faster than normal.
Weird.
It's kind of interesting. So, but
we should have read that. That would have been fun.
I wanted to, but because I was sick, and I was like, it goes around in circles. I was like. Not sure how I wanted to handle it.
So you didn't even tell me about it? You're just like,
I don't know. I thought about it, but I don't know. I didn't think you would want to ride it either. I'm kind of surprised. But anyway. So anyway, it talks about all the carousels and that those are the focus. Anyway. Let's see. Okay, so then it goes on to talk about Gemini, and it's like, okay. But so then the article's like, okay, but let's talk about Gemini, which is opening in a few months. And again, they said park officials are basing their performance claims on the laws of gravity. Engineers say if it's the tallest and steepest, they ought to be the fastest. So again, like the engineers are just like, we're not sure if it's going to break all the records we say it will, but based on what we know, it should.
I mean, maybe they just didn't have the technology there.
I guess so.
And so they could only clock it after it was built?
I don't know. I like, clearly the technology in 78 isn't as good as it is today,
right.
But it just seems weird for them to claim something, but also not really know if it was truly going to be true. Like,
okay.
And it's just funny to me that this is now a completely separate newspaper, completely separate interview, and they said the exact same thing. It's like, based on what we know, it should be the fastest, but we don't know. Like, so, all right. Oh, let's see. What do we got next? Oh, sorry. Technical difficulties again. There we go. So another article, basically, there were so many articles about it. Like they really were just pushing the marketing efforts so much.
But not very great.
Well, it was like everyone was talking about it, but at the same time, they really didn't know if it was going to break the records it said it would, which is funny. But let's see, what do I have highlighted here? The design features on Gemini all have a variety of purposes. For example, the ride will go around in a figure 8, which we talked about. Allows us to put twice as long a ride in the 6-acre site as a typical out and back coaster. It'll add the excitement when the ride goes above and under trestles. So kind of talked about that already. Ticket prices for 1978, $8.75 for adults. That is crazy. Can you imagine getting into Cedar Point for less than $9?
Wish.
Oh my gosh. And then also this is really random, but
you can't even get a good meal for that price.
I know, right? This is really random, has nothing to do with Gemini, but this is pre-Peanuts characters at Cedar Point. So they had their own original characters that are mentioned in this article. I don't have pictures of them. I probably could, I don't know if I could have found them, but here are the names of the 4-part characters. There was Cassie Bassett, Barney Bulldog, Daniel Spaniel, and Shep the Sheepdog. There you go. There's the Cedar Point mascots.
You know about Ricky the Raccoon, right? In Idlewild, that's their mascot.
Oh, see, I haven't been to Idlewild with you, so I didn't know about that.
Yeah, like when we were kids, like they didn't have like they had Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood Ride, and that was like the only thing that like was.
That's the only IP that they had.
Yeah,
there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so, but like other than that, they didn't have like Snoopy or Thomas.
Didn't have any.
Yeah, they didn't have any characters, and so they came up with their own characters, and they still to this day have Ricky the Raccoon.
That's funny. There are some parks that have done that. Like
he's kind of creepy.
Yeah, because like Kennywood has Kenny the Kangaroo, and that's always been their mascot for forever. Yeah. I'm trying to think. There's definitely some other parks that have mascots that are original IPs, but yeah. So that was apparently Cedar Point's mascots before they acquired the rights to the Peanuts characters.
Probably back in that day, probably people thought that the Mickey Mouse was creepy too.
They probably did. Like when I don't know if you've seen. Yeah, some of the original costumes, you're like, oh, that is terrifying.
I would not want Parker meeting Mickey Mouse.
Nightmare fuel. But they've definitely improved on that.
Yes. He's beloved now.
Yeah.
Very much
I honestly don't remember seeing any characters when we were at Cedar Point. Do you?
No, just Snoopy stuff. But
well, I don't even like a meet and greet. I don't remember seeing
any.
Problem
is we didn't really walk through anything except for that one time you went on the kiddie coaster by yourself.
I had to get my Woodstock Express credit, so we did go. I did ride Woodstock Express with a bunch of kids, but it was really fun. It was
quite the sight.
Well, it's funny because it's not like a kiddie coaster. Like it's bigger, but definitely there were no other adults that were riding by themselves. I was the only adult. Well, because the rows are meant for 2 people, but I just sat there by myself, and the ride operator had me buckle the other seatbelt, which was kind of funny. Also, they have to unbuckle your seatbelt with a key.
I guess like kids like.
I guess that's probably what it is, but I've never seen that on another coaster before. Anyway, off topic, but yeah. So those are the characters for Cedar Point back in '78. And then this is the last article I have I have some later, but this is the last one I have for now. This phrase here. Cedar Point Project Superintendent Jim Colvin measures the top track of Gemini at 125 feet 4 inches, the highest roller coaster in the world. You measuring it with what? A tape measure?
I got my dong.
I got my
tape measure.
I got my 130-foot tape measure. No, that's ridiculous.
I just tied them together.
Like you can see in the picture, like he
actually has something.
He does have something, but it says 125 feet 4 inch. This just has to be some ridiculously long stick or piece of paper that the park made up just so he could stand up there with it and quote unquote measure the top of the roller coaster.
Here's my son.
Here's your side.
Here's my stick.
I thought that was really bizarre. I guess it's a marketing effort of some kind. So,
alrighty.
They're
pulling out all the stops.
They really were. I found so many articles. So, coaster finished construction in May of 1978 and officially opened to the public on June 17th, 1978, and continues to operate to this day. So, I think I've got a couple. Oh, I do have one more article. This one's not super in-depth. It was just, the answer is Cedar Point. What's the largest amusement park in the country? If you said Disney World at Florida, you're right. And the second largest park? Nope, it's not Disneyland, Opryland, or Six Flags over Texas. It's Cedar Point at Sandusky, Ohio.
Shots fired.
What park has the most rides? Cedar Point. What park has the greatest number of roller coasters? Cedar Point. What park has the highest, steepest, faster roller coaster in the world? It will be Cedar Point. And then he goes on to talk about Gemini and, So, really, marketing efforts everywhere, all over the place.
Snobs back then.
All the amusement park articles from back then, they were all so angry with each other. I don't know what it is. Like, nowadays, the parks pretty much play nice with each other. Like, they will still make marketing claims, and every now and then their shots fired. Like, I'll give you an example that when Iron Gwazi opened at Busch Gardens Tampa earlier this year, it had been scheduled to open like a year and a half earlier, and just with COVID and it got delayed super long. Yeah. So when it opened, they made this big post about the opening of Iron Gwazi, and Iron Gwazi won Best New Roller Coaster for this year, so that was exciting. But when it opened, Universal Studios commented something like, "We're excited to announce that Velocicoaster has been open for 2 years already." So, there's, playful banter like that. But back then, it was literally like, no, we are the best. Like, Disneyland ain't got nothing on us. Just like, okay. Like, so. All right. I think I've got a couple commercials for Gemini. So these are...
Oh, I'm excited.
I love these. This is great. Hopefully, everyone listening will be able to hear this.
It was buried alive in ice and snow, but Gemini was too mean to die. It certainly knew would return. Finally, spring came to Cedar Point, hived on anger and rage, and Gemini's cold heart began to pound. Evil rushed through its icy veins. Gemini was free. Gemini, it's been waiting all winter just for you at Cedar Point.
Oh my gosh, can you believe that? That's so intense. And I don't even, the snow theme, like, I don't know what that's all about.
I mean, if they were building it during
I guess that's the thing, is that it was like buried in the snow as they're constructing it, and now it's broken free from the snow. The ice has melted, and Gemini is waiting for you.
It's supposed to be a family coaster, but like...
Well, back then, it wouldn't have been a family coaster.
Really?
It would have been the Steel Vengeance of the 1970s. Like, it was a big deal. So.
Because I was going to say, could you imagine a kid just sitting there like, Mom, I got it! Don't make me!
So intense. Here's another one. This was
buried
alive.
Oh, it's the same one. Yeah.
I think this is this one's intense too.
Terror pounds in your heart as you're thrown over the edge of Gemini at Cedar Point. Corkscrew twists your body through its cold steel.
I'm loving this actor. Oh!
Explodes in your brain as Demon Drop crashes you to earth. Cedar Point. We make you scream for more every summer.
So horror thing.
It's like an advertisement for a horror movie. That's so intense.
It's called Gemini. Gemini's astronomical.
I don't know, but yeah, like
it's not astronomical. Astronomy reference.
Yeah,
but they're trying to push the whole horror thing.
That was so intense.
Okay.
Like, and that one was advertising Demon Drop and Corkscrew as well, but just the screaming, it feels like a 70s horror movie. Like, it is very bizarre.
Alright.
So, I guess they're rather than trying to push the, come have fun, just come be scared, I don't.
Okay.
Very interesting. So, okay, so here's a park map from 1978, so you can see just some things that, I mean, this is obviously very different from how it is now, but this is pretty cool.
I like the little thing at the bottom.
Isn't that interesting? Line jumping is not a sporting event at Cedar Point. It's really funny.
I need to put that back up.
I know, right? I did see a couple signs in the park, like saying like those line jumping will be grounds for being
I didn't notice
kicked out of the park.
At all.
I didn't notice it either. So that one person that complained about always line jumping at Gemini.
I know other parks it's been a problem for us, but I didn't notice this one.
So here's Blue Streak at the front. You know, that's the same place it is today. Here's Corkscrew kind of in the middle of the park here. Cedar Creek Mine right over here, and then the big one, you know, Gemini out in the back there. So they had a couple other coasters. I think this one was that Jumbo Jet and Wildcat. Those are both gone nowadays. Gatekeeper kind of sits right where those two both are now. So and obviously there's lots of other coasters have been built since then, but I thought this was kind of cool. See the park map from 1978 when they opened it. So
yeah.
And then apparently the first two riders, or some of the first inaugural riders or whatever, were the governor of Ohio and the Cedar Point director of the board. So governor of Ohio came out to ride, you know, opening day of Gemini. So that's a pretty big deal. And I guess the ride was also apparently run by an all-girl crew that day. I don't know why, but I saw that.
Power to them.
I saw that in several newspapers, so I don't know why. It would have made more sense if they had like a girl crew and a guy crew is like
coincidence, and like they just kind of were like, oh, this is cool. We should expound upon that.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I saw like other dual coasters that they have like twins come out and ride it the first day. I don't remember what coaster that was, but that would have been cool. That would have made sense for this. Yeah. So I don't know. All girl crew. Okay, I don't have a problem with it. It's just I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense with the theme. Anyway. The ride experience, and it's still open to this day, and the ride experience is as follows. Riders board 30 passenger trains, 2 per row, 5 cars per train. Riders are able to choose whether to board the blue track on the left or the red track on the right. After disembarking, the trains make a long right turn before ascending the 125-foot lift hill. The trains then dive down the 118-foot first drop, hitting the max speed of 60 miles per hour and diving underneath the support structure. The trains ascend back upwards before making a slow turnaround to the left. After a small drop, the trains fly over an airtime hill and up into another turnaround to the right. The trains follow a small drop over an airtime hill that goes back down a large drop, back down to ground level, and into another turnaround to the left. The trains then drop down over 2 airtime hills, and then the only time the tracks diverge at all is right at the very end. They go into helixes that mirror each other right before they come into the final breaks. So I also saw lots of people, apparently you can give high fives to people on the other train.
I would not.
I saw it all over the place. When I was looking at reviews, when I was reading about when I was watching videos, it's apparently a thing. You can give people high fives on the lift hill as you're going through the slow turnarounds, because you know you're not going very fast on those. Apparently, if you reach out your hand and they reach out theirs, you can give a high five to people on the other train.
Don't they ask you to keep your hands?
Oh, they definitely don't encourage that, but apparently it is a thing and like a tradition among people that go to Cedar Point all the time.
Oh, okay.
So
I feel like that could get you kicked out of the park.
And that terrifies me to try to reach out to another coaster train. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't do it, but apparently that is a thing. So. Here's a special from when I don't know if it's when it opened or pretty close after it opened, but it was from some Cleveland TV. It's called AM Cleveland, so probably some morning TV show that was broadcast in Cleveland. They went to Cedar Point and did a bunch of interviews, but then they had this segment on Gemini. We won't watch the whole thing, but just wanted to watch some of this because this is kind of interesting. Music.
Well, we've been to Oceana, Lofty Levels, we've been to the African Safari, and we've seen all the crabs, but the main reason people come here to Cedar Point is, of course, for the terrific rides, especially for the roller coasters. There are 5 of them here. They have given over 99 million different rides to different people, of course. And the biggest one and the best one right here is the Gemini. It's the racing one. It's a double roller coaster. They say it gets up to 60 miles an hour, a drop on the first hill of 118 feet, and I'm ready to go. So let's do it.
So he then goes on to, we won't watch the whole thing. He goes on to ride it, and he basically commentates on the ride the whole time. Like, he just is saying what the ride is doing, even though you can watch it on the video.
Something that would happen at that time period, just like.
So anyway, I just thought that was kind of cool. Like, you know, they're talking about like Gemini is that was the coaster that was bringing people to Cedar Point at the time. It was a big deal. So, all right, as has become Cedar Point tradition, park officials were insistent on marketing Gemini as a record-breaking coaster. They claimed Gemini was the tallest, steepest, and fastest coaster in the world. However, there's a lot of discrimination on if these claims are accurate or not. Busch Gardens Williamsburg opened Loch Ness Monster 2 weeks before Gemini. So here's Loch Ness Monster here, this yellow one. And then Gemini up in the top left there. They opened Loch Ness Monster 2 weeks before Gemini and claimed all the exact same records. That it was the tallest, steepest, and fastest. So let's look into the details, and because this is, I mean, heck, you can even see there's this newspaper article talking about 2 parks claim roller coaster world records. Both Cedar Point and Virginians call own amusement ride highest, fastest, and steepest. So this was like a thing about among enthusiasts, and like, okay, well, which one's actually accurate? So tallest, both coasters have some credence here. Loch Ness Monster is technically taller at 130 feet, but Gemini has a longer drop at 118 feet. So both, I don't know, you can claim both. However, the record is also technically owned by Montezuma's Revenge at Knott's Berry Farm because it was 148 feet tall. But Montezuma's Revenge isn't a closed circuit coaster; it's a shuttle coaster. So it like would go up the spike and then come back. So they're probably saying, "Well, we're the tallest full circuit coaster. That one's the tallest. It's not full circuit. It's like
tomato.
I know. So it's like ridiculous, you know. So none of these, you know, they all claim they all own the record, even though I don't know who technically owns it. Technically, Loch Ness owns the full circuit tallest coaster record, and this would be the tallest coaster, period. So Gemini technically doesn't own either of the records. Okay. Steepest. Both records do claim this record because they both did have an angle of drop of 55 degrees. The only thing is Loch Ness Monster opened a couple weeks earlier, so I guess, you know, Gemini never owned that record. It shared it with Loch Ness Monster.
Got it.
So, okay, they both are the steepest, whatever. The most ridiculous record is fastest, though, because neither of them were the fastest at the time. Both of them claimed it, and neither of them were. So in April 1976, Six Flags St. Louis opened Screamin' Eagle, which is this one in the bottom left here. That coaster would break the record for the fastest coaster in the world, a record that was held by Cyclone at Luna Park for almost 50 years. So that's pretty crazy. Screamin' Eagle's top speed is 62 miles per hour, while Gemini and Loch Ness Monster are both 60. So I don't know if they just didn't even check, or if you remember in the articles, they were like, well, based on the math, it should be the fastest. And then it just wasn't.
I guess they were trying to say that so they didn't get like...
I don't know, but clearly it was not the fastest. The other thing that's bizarre about this article, where is it? Yeah, here. The laws of physics indicate that Gemini should be faster because it had a taller drop. But Loch Ness top speed is put at 70 miles per hour, which is also completely false. So I don't know what this article is talking about, but Loch Ness Monster doesn't come anywhere close to 70 miles an hour. So no one has their facts straight. Everyone is wrong, except for, I guess, Six Flags St. Louis says they have the fastest, and that is true. Everyone else is wrong. So this is just a combobulation of numbers that is absolutely, everyone is wrong. This makes no sense to me. It's probably, I don't know if it's because it's the 70s and like the internet's not there for people to check things.
I guess so.
I don't know. And maybe they assumed, well, that park's in Virginia, we're all the way up here, so no one here, like none of the general public is even gonna know. Only the enthusiasts are gonna know that it's not true.
Yeah.
I don't know. It says in here that here it is. Cedar Point's marketing manager said he views the controversy in the same friendly manner, but added, "We feel confident in our claims, or we wouldn't make them."
Okay.
But they're wrong. Their claims were wrong. I don't. So anyway, that's the interesting controversy that was between Gemini and Loch Ness Monsters. Both of them were claiming these records. Neither of them held all the records they claimed they did. So, meanwhile, Aerodynamics built both of them. So Aerodynamics couldn't care less. So Aerodynamics held the record regardless. But anyway, it was funny. In 1979, so just a year later, Cedar Point would build a small kiddie coaster just across the midway from Gemini. So due to its proximity, the coaster would be called Junior Gemini. So you can see it even had the same font and looks very boring. Yeah. No, like this looks unfinished. It looks like they forgot to put in trees or whatever. But anyway, that coaster's still there today, but after they acquired the Peanuts characters, they renamed it to, I think, Wilderness Run is what it's called. So I did not ride this one because this one's the kiddie coaster. You can't ride this one unless you have a kid with you. That's how small this one is. I guess they had some other rides in there too. And I guess this was called like the Junior Gemini Kids area, I think is what they named it. So let's see. Gemini would remain the star attraction at the park for a long time. The park would open a few additional coasters over the next few years, such as Iron Dragon, which is still there, and Avalanche Run, which is not there anymore. But Gemini remained the headliner until 1989 when Cedar Point opened Magnum XL 200, which is still there. The coaster would be outclassed one by one as Cedar Point continued to build record breaker after record breaker, as they have done for years now. But Gemini continued to be one of the busiest rides in the park. In fact, I saw a newspaper article from 2002 that said Gemini was the, quote, busiest roller coaster in the world.
Another claim that they probably can't prove.
Yeah, so they said they gave over 2.4 million rides that year, which is very impressive.
Right.
Usually if you get your coaster over 1 million rides in a year, you're happy with that. That's a good number. Well, if you're a regional park, probably. Like I know Silver Dollar City, if they hit 1 million on a coaster, like that's a good number for them. So 2.4 million, that's a big deal. And it makes sense because it's a dual coaster, so you get twice the capacity. But I find it hard to believe that Gemini would be busier than Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom. That runs 365 days a year and also has 2 tracks.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find it hard to believe that Gemini would have more riders per year than Space Mountain or other Disney rides. But anyway, whatever. That's what they said. They said it's the busiest roller coaster in the world. In 2008, Gemini celebrated its 30th anniversary. In those 30 years, Gemini had become the first of 4 Cedar Point coasters to break the coaster height record. So Gemini broke it in 78, and then Magnum XL 200 broke it in 89, Millennium Force in 2000, and then Top Thrill Dragster in 2005. I think it's 2005. 2003? I think it's 2003, actually. So you can just kind of see this Gemini has kind of become buried under all these other coasters that Cedar Point's built over the years, but still important to their history and still was a big part of the park. So according to rumors in 2011, I could not confirm this, but I saw lots of people talk about it. Apparently, Cedar Creek Mine Rides trains were becoming outdated and uncomfortable for riders. And Gemini had 6 trains, but never used all 6. They usually just used 4 at a time. So Cedar Point apparently removed Cedar Creek Mine Ride's old trains and replaced them with 2 of Gemini's extra trains. So there's this picture online of one of the Gemini trains on Cedar Creek Mine Ride. And so apparently from what I hear, and like I said, this is rumor, I couldn't confirm it with the park or anything, but they took these and like either repainted them or did everything to make it fit with the theme of Cedar Creek Mine Ride.
Yeah.
Which they would fit on those tracks because
I was gonna just say, like, do they fit on that
because
track?
it's the same manufacturer and technically the same model. The Gemini was a custom built coaster. Like Aerodynamics didn't really build anything else like it. The most similar thing that's like it is Excalibur at Valley Fair, but that one's not a dueling coaster, so even that one's kind of different. But it uses the same tubular track that the mine train coasters use. So you could technically take a Thunderation train and throw it onto Gemini. Technically speaking, it should fit. Now,
it's like really weird to think about.
Mm-hmm. So just the way the track is designed, it should be the same. So I'm assuming they may have to switch out for newer parts because they were built 10 years apart from each other. But the Gemini trains are a lot more comfortable than some of the old mine train coasters. When I rode, what's the one called at Carowinds?
I was gonna say the one at Kings Island.
It's not Carolina. Carolina Gold Rusher. So Carolina Gold Rusher, when your brother and I rode it, it was so uncomfortable. I had to cross my legs just to fit in the thing, and your brother is like 6 inches taller than me, so he barely, like if he'd been an inch taller, he probably would not have been able to ride that thing because his knees were just jammed into the seat in front of him.
Let me just put my knees up.
Oh my gosh, it was horrible. But I didn't feel that way on Cedar Creek Mine Ride, so I think they must have changed it. And again, I can't confirm it, so I don't know if that ever happened, but there is definitely this picture of a Gemini train on Cedar Creek Mine Ride, which is weird. So.
Oh, that's weird.
Let's see. In 2018, Gemini celebrated its 40th birthday and continues to operate to this day. I can't say for certain, but so when they announced the 30th anniversary, they said it had given over 83 million rides at that point. So it seems at this point it should have crossed over the 100 million ride threshold. But I never saw like a celebration or a newspaper article saying like Gemini celebrates 100 millionth rider. I never saw that. So I'm not sure why, because doing the math, it should be at like 115, 120 million riders at this point. So I'm not sure why they never made a big deal out of that, but just based on the math, it should have easily crossed over 100 million riders at some point. So that's cool. And though the records Gemini broke are up for debate, there's no doubt that the coaster was a huge success and one of the most thrilling coasters of the 1970s. And that is the history of Gemini at Cedar Point. Now, before I close, I have two absolutely ridiculous newspaper articles that didn't really have to tell anything to do with telling the story, but I could not leave it out because they were just so bizarre. So the first one I have here, so here's the article. Port Clinton Park brings wilds of Africa into Ohio's backyard. Okay. And the reason I found this is because I was searching for like Cedar Point and roller coaster articles from like the late 70s. And this is why it came up. It talks about Cedar Point here, but this is the first paragraph. Are you one of the countless parents who dreads the idea of packing up the family for the seasonal trek to the amusement park? Do you cringe at the thought of struggling through crowds and standing in line for 20 minutes with hundreds of screaming kids just so your children can spend 65 seconds riding the roller coaster? If this sounds like you, why not relax this year? Take the family to African Lion Safari, a unique family, and it goes on to advertise their thing. But I just, that whole paragraph, I just read that, I was like, huh? It just...
Someone's very
anti-roller coaster. Like, stand in line for 20 minutes. First of all, 20 minutes is not that long. I don't know if maybe it was a long time back in the 70s. Maybe you didn't wait as long for coasters back then as you do now. But 20 minutes is not that bad.
I'm like even reading like where the part it talks about Cedar Point.
Yeah, even if the kids do insist on taking in the amusement park scene, you can still find time to unwind before or after African Lion Safari. This is especially true if Cedar Point is your destination, located just 10 minutes away. Just really just trying to push the point like, man, you should come check out our safari. Cedar Point, I guess.
The Alliance.
I guess if you want to go to Cedar Point, you can, but who would want to do that? So, this was really funny. I just found that really funny. So, this one, as ridiculous as that other one is, this is even more ridiculous. Oh. This article is called Battle of the Theme Parks. This is, I don't know when, this is in a newspaper, but it's actually fairly recent. I think it was in like oh gosh, I don't remember when Cedar Point bought Kings Island, but it was right after that is when this happened. Oh. So it's post 2000 for sure. I don't remember the exact year. But there's these two people. One of them is a Cedar Point fan, and one of them's a Kings Islands fan. And they have this whole article of each other bashing the other park and trying to convince the other why the other park is better.
Okay.
So, I wish I could just read this whole thing because it is just ridiculous. But let me give you some of the highlights. So let's see. There's the names of these two women are Stephanie and Amelia. So Stephanie says, "I can't believe you just called Kings Island the underdog." Amelia says, "The truth is the light, and I was trying to be nice. Cedar Point would whomp on Kings Island in a fist fight. Compared to Cedar Point, Kings Island is wick, wick, whack." What does that mean?
That's the slang, man. That's the go-to.
In post 2000?
Apparently.
That sounds like a phrase from like the 60s. I don't know. Amelia says, "Yeah." Oh, wait. So Stephanie says, "You're so totally biased. You said that before we even walked in the gate. I hate to tell you this, but Cleveland does not rock." And Amelia says, "Yeah, it does. There's a song about it rocking and music never lies." Okay. Amelia says, "Kings Island is like a quick fix convenience store. Cedar Point is like a Jungle Gyms or a Meyer Supercenter." What?
I'm confused.
Stephanie says, "Oh please, Cedar Point is a vast concrete wasteland with zero character and ambiance." Oh wow. My gosh. There is this is ridiculous.
Take Hater to a whole new level.
Let's see. "You covered your eyes the whole time we were on Power Tower anyway, big baby." True, but I didn't cover my eyes when I was on Kings Island's coasters because none of the rides scared me. Isn't scary the point? The trees and the giant fountain were scarier than the rides at Kings Island. What is happening? This article is so bizarre. Oh my gosh, I really wish I could just read the whole thing, but I'm just trying to pick out the best parts. This is where I actually found it, because they do talk about Gemini here. So they're talking about the racer and said, let's see. "Since you want to throw around stats, Cedar Point was named Best Park for Thrills and Park with the Best Bang for Your Buck." Stephanie says, "Remember, you were raving about the backwards ride on the racer," which at this point, racer was still riding one train backwards.
Still so cool.
Amelia says, "Yeah, riding the racer backwards was fun, but the Gemini was better when it comes to two dual track coasters. There's nothing better than mocking your friends on the red roller coaster as you speed by in the blue one. Talking smack is fun." Stephanie says, "Yeah, the Gemini gets some points for looking your friend in the eye across the track as you crest the hill, yelling, 'See ya later, sucker.'" Amelia says, "You got that right, sucker. Kings Island is fun, but it doesn't make much sense. The food was great, but what does Bubblegum Shrimp Shack have to do with Oktoberfest? I didn't see any bratwursts on their menu."
Oh my gosh.
And then Stephanie says, "Kings Island has better uniforms. At least the kids there don't have to wear Catholic school shorts." What? I am
These
flabbergasted.
Like the writer of this almost like took
oh my god,
like certain things and just was like, okay, this is good banter, like, but it doesn't make sense.
Oh, this is so bizarre. I could go on and on about this. Let's see. The funny part is Amelia even admits it. She says, "You got me there. Cedar Point's uniforms are busted, but it's nothing like Kings Island's workers were fashion models. Besides, Cedar Point's visitors were hotter. Maybe we just went to Kings Island on a bad day." What? What are we talking about?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Let's see. Amelia ends by saying, "Good grief, Erwin. Get to the point and ride on." Wow. All right. There's this huge thing here of like a head-to-head with Kings Island on the left side and Cedar Point on the right. They talk about all the coasters and everything. Some of these are weird. Like Cedar Point put the signature ride as Magnum XL 200 and Millennium Force, but this was after Top Thrill Dragster had opened, which is weird. But I don't know. I guess people do like Millennium Force better. They talk about the lockers. Like I don't know, it's weird. They talk about the Ferris wheels, and they dock points to Kings Island because Kings Island didn't have a Ferris wheel, but Cedar Point had one. It's like okay. And the carousel, one built in 1926 with a Wurlitzer organ at Kings Island, and then Cedar Point 3, oldest built in 1912 with a Wurlitzer organ. Like, what are we doing? Like, this is.
No idea.
Somebody at this, this was a Dayton newspaper, looks at Dayton Daily News is where it looks like. And so, which Dayton is like 45 minutes from Cincinnati and like 3 hours from Cedar Point. So they kind of, you can go to both parts from Dayton. Yeah. And so, the Dayton Daily News must have just had nothing. And they're like, can we just write a whole spread about Cedar Point versus Kings Island? And just took 2 of their editors and said, you two just smack talk each other about your home park. This has to be the most bizarre newspaper article I've found since we started the show.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Oh my gosh. So, there you go.
Yeah. Thanks. I needed that in my
life. Yeah, clearly. Oh my goodness.
I just feel like this actually just wasted our time completely.
This is ridiculous. Anyway, that is all for the Gemini.
Good night, Airtime Traveler.
Oh my gosh. What? This is why I had such a hard time with this episode. I just kept finding stuff like this. I'm like, I have to bring this up. Even though they mentioned Gemini 2 times, I have to bring this up because this is too ridiculous not to. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for tuning in to this week, or this episode of Airtime Traveler. Hope you enjoyed learning about the history of Gemini.
I did.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, regardless of all the ridiculous stuff. It is interesting to see that, the marketing efforts of parks when they're building a big new attraction is really interesting. Like, we'll talk about this in another episode when we talk about news, but Busch Gardens Williamsburg just announced Dark Coaster, which is going to be an indoor coaster that's based off of snowmobiles. So you're gonna
cool.
Yeah. So you're gonna ride it like one of those motorcycle coasters, like Tron or something else like that, but it's based on snowmobiles. Anyway, they marketed it as the world's first indoor straddle coaster. That's their big marketing thing. First indoor straddle coaster. I just saw a lot of people like, oh wow, they're really reaching for that one. Like marketing teams will just do whatever they can to grab onto something that they can throw into a marketing,
right?
In their social media and their commercials to get people to come check out the new ride. So Gemini, clear, between Gemini and Loch Ness Monster just butting heads over which held the record. So clearly, but anyway, fascinating history. So thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Airtime Traveler. If you like the show, be sure to let us know by giving us a 5-star review and following us on wherever you may be listening. That way you're alerted every time we release a new episode. So
if you give us a 5-star review, we'll give you a
record. we'll send you an LP record of Bob Seger or the Eagles. Also, we'll give you a high five on Gemini. Ridiculous. Be sure to follow us on social media too. We're over on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is just @Airtime Traveler. We're having lots of conversations over there and sharing different things from our experiences at the parks, and so lots to check out over there. And you'll also be able to keep in touch with whatever new things we've got going on, whether it's our podcast or I've thought about having some contests coming up maybe towards the end of the year. So I've thought about doing something like that. So be sure to keep an eye on our social media for that. And that's all I have. You have anything else to add to our Gemini episode?
I did. I said we're going to give records to people with Bob Seger.
You better head to the record shop downtown and see if they got some Bob Seger albums. Well, thank you for tuning in to this week of Airtime Traveler, and we will see you in the next episode.